Okay, brilliant. All right, so the agenda for I guess, the next couple of days will be as you can see on the screen. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to break it up into two sessions. I've allocated 5 hours for today and 5 hours for tomorrow. Should take us up, respectively till about 12:30 in Australia. I'm assuming about 4:30 in the US, and about 2:30 in New Zealand, if my time zones are correct. So look, if we skim through all this material quickly, then I'll give you all two options. We can either stop for the day and let you all continue with your day-to-day activities, or we can continue on for tomorrow's sessions. I've broken it up because I guess it's important that that we spend some good time with I guess all the elements that I have there in the agenda. So we've been through the intros of everyone. Now I guess I might just click on we'll just go through the agenda for today. So secondly, we'll just speak about what your pain points are today and what you'd like to learn about Agile. So hopefully I could explain anything that you might have any ambiguity on, or any process or whatnot that we aim to work with moving forward with Agile versus the typical waterfall environment. Methodology of delivering projects, just an overview of the Scrum framework and how we're going to be working, or how we have adopted Agile at the moment. Key Scrum roles, so shifting from waterfall to Agile, the key roles that I guess play critical importance to an Agile team, and the Scrum ceremonies that I guess the Scrum Master will need to facilitate to maximize efficiency and effectiveness of the Agile framework. Moving on to tomorrow, the agenda is the guide to story writing. So requirements in the Agile framework are captured as user stories, leading into a hierarchy of epics. The epic is the umbrella of the umbrella feature, and the user story are those requirements that fall underneath it. We'll go through a guide of how to split a story. So if you have a massive requirement, it's best to just split it out into piecemeal sizes. Continuing on to a definition of ready. So what artifacts we require before we actually move the project into a development phase, or as we start sprinting. A definition of done. So this is the criteria that each story must meet for it to be moved in through a Jira wall to the done column. Very important key to how we operate Agile, which will also save a lot of time for you all, will be estimating and sizing of stories. And then we'll move on to the Verifone global tool. So what we have today in the Verifone software kit that enables us to operate Agile. And finally, I'll go through an Agile RACI. This is something that I'd collaborated in my past role. So just a bit of background about me. So I've been an Agile delivery lead in Westpac Banking Corporation. I was at Westpac for about 3 to 4 years, working in as a project manager / delivery manager in business banking digital. And there we had, basically we were working on a mobile app called Westpac Live. And basically software solutions that need to get out to market with lots of changes need to happen iteratively. We couldn't wait for requirements and specs to be built prior to launching, as you could imagine. It's an ever-changing environment. And prior to that, I was working at Telstra Digital. Similarly, as a product owner, working on Telstra is a telecommunications company in Australia, working on their 24/7 mobile app. So a bit of experience in the digital space. And prior to that, I was a business analyst in risk and compliance at a bank in Australia, which we call BT Financial Group. So that's a bit about me. So we might continue on now. What are your pain points today, and what would you like to learn about Agile? So I might just pass it on just to the leads to speak to this one. So maybe Chana and Dean, just maybe 2 or 3 points as to anything in focus that you'd like me to cover over the next 2 days, which you might be aware of your teams having issues with at the moment. So maybe we can start with Chana.
Well, our primary pain point is tracking the schedule and knowing who is doing what and where they are with respect to their ask, right? That has been the main issue all along for Verifone because we could never meet our schedules as scheduled, right? So they always slip sometime maybe 10%, maybe 50%. So I guess that's the biggest pain, right? So if you could help us track and know where we are at any given point, that would be a fantastic outcome.
Brilliant. Yep, we can do that, Chana. That was a problem that we had in Australia also. So just a bit of background. I only joined Verifone in October last year. So this was just after the massive restructure happened. So I joined the team with another colleague of mine, Bob Reynolds, who's the ANZ director. So essentially, the team was just lots of silos, people doing things that project managers weren't really visible of. So just in the 3 odd months that we've been here, we've enabled the shift and yeah, done exactly what your key point there was of tracking schedule and monitoring or knowing who's doing what and when and how much time is left to completion. So yep, definitely. I'll talk to that over the next couple of days. If there's any more that comes to mind, do let me know. Dean, I'll pass over to you. So, is there any key call out for you that I could have at the back of mind as we progress?
Yeah, there's probably two objectives for the sessions over the next couple of days. One is really just giving ourselves a refresher on some of the key elements of Agile. So we already practice within our teams in New Zealand elements of lean practices, but there's more that we could do and improvements we could make. So um, enabling us to get a good base of knowledge across what is our leadership group in New Zealand. That's one objective. And then the second objective, as we move into the next generation of solution delivery, we're really interested in talking about how we align across teams. So historically, we've done a lot of the solution development internally. Moving forward, we're obviously working to leverage solutions and to work with other teams across the globe. So we're really interested in talking about making sure that we're following the right practices around getting our local requirements onto some of the global backlogs and speaking the same language essentially around planning and delivery for the next generation of terminals. So those are the two main areas for me.
Perfect. So yeah, so look, refresher on key elements. That's it. That's easily done. So hopefully, if there's anything in the agenda that I've missed that you'd like me to focus on, please just shoot me a message or an email, and I'll ensure I'll add that in there. Solution delivery alignment across teams. We all know that we've had a new NPI global process that's just been mandated across the company. And Dean, I'm sure you're aware of this. Within Australia also and the APAC region, we're still getting to terms as to what needs to be done to align our delivery mechanisms and our intake to productionizing, whilst also ensuring that we've created tokens for all our new projects and we've mapped them to our dependent teams which are building the 80% module. So yep, we can definitely speak to that over the next couple of days. So thanks for sharing those points. Okay, so I might move to the next item on the agenda. So we'll basically dive into the material now. So the slide that I have here, waterfall versus agile. So a lot of us many of us, I assume, would be quite familiar with the waterfall project methodology, which is very, I guess, regimented in the sense that you have your phased deliverables, you have your requirements analysis and your design phase, your implementation, your testing, and your maintenance. any changes that come along the way might be drawn through a change request, and the change request will have to get approved for funding, and then you do another scoping session, you size it, and then, basically update your project plan. So the biggest difference between Agile and Waterfall is that the Agile deliverables are produced and accepted incrementally around short iterations. So generally between 2 to 4 weeks. In general, Verifone might be a bit different over here in the sense that the sales teams will pitch a client through your product owner. So over here we have Ben Hughes. In the APAC region, it's Ben Hughes and Mohit Grover. Mohit has resigned, and he's got a replacement at the moment. I haven't been introduced to her yet, so I'm sure we'll get to know her over in the next couple of weeks. And ZFolk too. So typically 2 to 4 weeks for a shippable product. But yeah, as I said, in Verifone, we try to hit a commit date. So that commit date is when we've promised the client when we're going to have our solution ready and shippable to them. Now we work in sprints. So basically, the objective of a sprint is to prioritize a number of user stories into a 10-day sprint. Now, typically, a team is made up of, might be, say, 4 developers, 2 or 3 testers, and a Scrum Master. So as we delve into these slides over the course of the day, there's a bit of a shift, I guess, in the responsibility of a project manager as to how their competencies are used and measured in the Agile framework. So whilst we do have a necessity for the project manager, there's more of an importance for the Scrum Master. So a Scrum Master and a project manager are generally interlinked, and generally if we are to create a change in the structure of the team, the first point of call that I'd ask you to think of at the back of mind would be to nominate a Scrum Master to ensure that all the ceremonies that we go through in the Scrum framework are facilitated properly. So in looking to the slide, so the Waterfall project primarily has a fixed set of features which might be collected by the BA in the business requirements document. Your time and your cost might be variable through the change request process. And quality, I guess it's important, but quality is always dependent on your 4 project sliders: time, cost, scope, and quality. Whereas with Agile, because we break everything into user stories, everything is in scope. So when we have a change request, or when a product manager comes through with a change in what they anticipate the end vision to be, we don't need a formal change request process per se. It's essentially, we'll take on that feature, let's just add it to the backlog. Now I'll go through a Jira backlog over the course of the day. I'll use our CBA CM5 Carbon Mobile 5 project just to look at how they've managed their backlog and their sprints, just to see how you can break down your requirements into stories and epics. So I guess, so we'll go through it again. So the Waterfall project uses stages or phases. So as I said, requirements design, requirements analysis, systems design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. So it's very heavy on documentation. So your architect might need a functional specifications document, BA for business requirements document. Your testers might need a test completion report or a testing plan prior to even commencing and getting the green light to dive into the project. With Agile, we're using iterations known as sprints. So the confirmed requirements are confirmed by the product owner. So essentially, the key person, the go-to in this framework is your product owner. So BAs in the team, essentially, it all comes down to responsibilities and accountabilities. At the end of the day, if we ship something to the client and it's not deemed, worthy of what their initial ideas or concepts are, then it always falls back to the product owner, or the BA will say, oh, I captured the requirements from the product owner. The product owner is essentially the hierarchy of where we should get the mandate of what needs to be delivered. So essentially, we'll get stories in sprints from the product owner. The BAs will be there to document and write these stories. And yeah, so that once we have a defined list of stories, then we'll get into a sprint zero, which I'll discuss over the next few slides. So the waterfall projects are suitable for bigger projects. Agile suitable for smaller software releases. Agile benefits software projects because we need to adapt to change. By the time we release something, it might be obsolete. Hence, breaking requirements down to small iterative chunks works best for this form of project management. In waterfall, the project leader is called a project manager, and most of them are from the IT background. If you work in large-scale businesses like banking, insurance, or telco, you'll have IT PMs and you'll have business PMs. So your business PMs work with the business to deal with, say, your legalities, your compliance, your information securities, clearance, or whatnot. Whereas the IT PM is primarily focused on IT solutions and integrating into the business. Whereas here in Agile, we have the Scrum Master who's in control of the whole project, and they don't need to have an IT background. Once a Scrum Master is proficient in the way they operate Scrum, it's a hat that can be shared across the whole team. And furthermore, it's great to have a Scrum Master skill set in your, I guess, your credentials, because it's these days moving forward. It's definitely criteria that many organizations look for. So in terms of keeping yourself up to date with your own know-how of project management, Scrum Master is, I'd say, your gateway into mastering the Agile framework. Interactions, so waterfall interactions with users happens when gathering requirements and for user testing. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions to this point here, but generally we'd have our scoping sessions and we'd get our product person in from our client and we'd go through the requirements. It'll generally be through a massive Excel document. Sometimes there might be 200 requirements, and it might take you a whole week to workshop all these items. Similarly, when you're trying to conduct user experience testing or user experience feedback, it just takes a long time before you actually document everything and have everything ready to move into delivery. Whereas in Agile, constant meetups is required to interact with users. So when I say constant meetups, I mean fortnightly sessions with the product owner at a minimum. We have our daily stand-ups with the team to check in on where everyone's at. We have a backlog grooming session, which is basically every sprint we'll go through the backlog to plan what our next sprint will be to ensure that every requirement is concise to be delivered, such that there is no ambiguity. Essentially, we want to get into a sprint and we want to dive in and have no distractions. So we want to have a clear path, which is why certain Scrum ceremonies are set up to ensure that the developers and the testers are able to do that. For all the QA folk that we have on the call, acceptance criteria is key to writing test cases. So key to not only writing user requirements as stories is also ensuring that we have concise acceptance criteria. Now, a final point, there is no turning back to the previous phase if there are any requirements or problems occur. So with Waterfall, once you've delivered, scope might be deprioritized, but once it's implemented, you're in warranty. And if there's any change, then it's either a phase 2 or a change request. Whereas with Agile, if there are any new requirements, the process of the project is still running. So you've committed yourself to a sprint. What you're developing over, say, the 10-day sprint can't be removed, or if it can be removed, it can only be from the call of the product owner, and you need to get that in writing. Via an email or whatnot. I know Verifine's very good with having chats on the fly and having a call or a Skype message or whatnot, but we need traceability. And what we're trying to get towards is working through what we can see has happened ongoing through, say, Confluence and Jira. So Confluence and Jira, you can tag a user story just like you can in, say, Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. So it works the same way. If sometimes we get bogged down with the thousands of emails we have in our inbox. So if there's any change to a certain story, or if there is an update or anything concerning the user story, then you can just update that within the user story in Jira. Moving on to the next slide. So as I said, just recapping on the last one. So the key difference with Waterfall to Agile is Waterfall, you get the requirements analysis phase, then it follows a software development lifecycle, right? So you got your design phase, your implementation phase, your testing and your maintenance, and that might be spread across, 3 to 4 months or 12 months or even more for a large project. So with Agile, when we have a release, so basically when we get into a discovery, and I'll talk to this over the course of the next couple of days, tying into our new intake process. So Danny Rowland was doing a lot of the training, so she's mentioned the whole Scrum of Scrums. Scrum of Scrums to me is actually, or in Agile terms, is actually a discovery. So a discovery would be when you get your requirements and your epics from the client. That's when you size the actual end-to-end build of the project. And after that phase, that'll be when we will get the green light from your business owner and the product owner to see if the project will be viable to dive into phasing out into sprints and epics. So when we look at this diagram over here, we have our requirements definition. So that first phase will be at the discovery. Now, a large key to Agile development is UX. Some people call it HCD, Human-Centered Design. If you're working in the mobile app space, or if you're working in anything to do with websites or a website build, then you'll have your UI design. And requirements when you're working with your user experience or your HCD is very easy, because you're essentially mapping each requirement or each step in the user experience to a requirement, to a user story. When we don't have user experience and we're mapping requirements, or we're defining stories, then this is when you need the product owner. So in Verifone, there's two aspects to that. There's our own product owner and there's the client product owner. So the client product owner will work very closely with our internal Verifone product owner, and we'll look to our Verifone product owner to ensure that all the requirements that we've captured are agreed upon by the client. So then you go into your development cycle and your testing, so your internal in-sprint testing, which is QA. And then finally, we'll have a phase of user acceptance testing, which will be done by our client. And then if there's no feedback from the client and if everything's okay to be released, then it goes into production. So this whole cycle can happen over, say, 3 sprints or 4 sprints or even 2 sprints. It just depends on how large the change we're implementing. Are there any questions regarding the last 2 slides? Nope. Okay, all right.
No, there is one question.
Yep.
How far is Verifone in currently in adopting this company-wide? How would you estimate?
Yeah, look, company. Sorry.
How many teams are already doing 100% agile?
Yeah, look, so I can speak for APAC because I guess I'm a bit more hands-on in the Asia Pacific region. In the Asia Pacific region, I'd say probably our Australian Aussie team is the most progressed right now. So we've broken down, say, a team of 25 to 30 developers and QAs into feature teams. Sorry, this is across Australia and New Zealand. So I didn't forget you guys there in NZ. So what's happened is by breaking teams down into feature teams, there's 3 to 4 developers and 3 testers assigned to each major client that we have. So We have a feature team that's implementing a $6 million project for Commonwealth Bank of Australia. We have another feature team which is working on Westpac. So Westpac is about another, say, $10 million of change. We have another feature team that's working on smaller, say, 1 million, about $3 million revenue projects. So that's Australia Post, TravelX, ICAPS, which is like our a health fund card that use our Verifone terminals. So basically, each team has a bucket of work that they manage. And each, so rather than working in your own silos, a lot of these feature teams cross collaborate and they share what they do day to day, such that if any one developer is away one day because he might be sick or there's family commitments, there's another person in the feature team to pick up what they're doing, such that our sprint cadence doesn't slow down. So the key, I guess, importance of this is that there's no key person risk if someone goes on leave or if someone's on holiday. To answer your question in a global aspect as to how many teams have adopted this methodology, look, Verifone strategically and through Mike Pulley, there's you may have heard of the term shift left. So we want to get to 100% agile adaptation ASAP. So the new NPI interlock process is one that is focused on teams knowing agile and operating agile. Obviously, agile might be easy to grasp the concepts, but it's very hard to master because you need constant coaching just to keep you in the boundaries of what needs to be done. So, look, I'd say, APAC, I'd say we're about 60% there. Globally, if I'm looking at North America, I think North America might be about 50 to 60% also, but, don't quote me. Danny Rowland is my counterpart in the US, and she'd have a better understanding of how your North America and Latin America countries are change. But the strategic goal is to have 100% adaptation by the next financial year. So if that means preaching the methodology to the folk across the globe as a start, then I guess we're planting the seed, and ongoing coaching will ensure that over time, so maybe 2 to 4 years, we'll all know how to operate agile. It's a slow process because there's about 5,000 to 6,000 staff across the whole company. But the key point is that we're making that change. In my last role, it took about 24 months to go from phasing out, not 100% phasing out waterfall, but getting the stakeholders thinking in a more agile manner, which is flexible and non-resistant to change. So the biggest draw card of I guess biggest challenge of adapting this is just people not wanting to embrace the change and seeing what's in it for them, so to speak.
Thanks.
Yep.
Well, halfway there is not a bad number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's agile. Everyone wants to work agile. We just need someone to hold our hands through the process. So it's we're halfway there if we're thinking that way. Yep.
Another question. In the previous slide, you talked about the Scrum Master.
Yep.
And you also said the Scrum Master need not be technical. So sometimes the program managers are also non-technical. Would a program manager do both the jobs as a Scrum Master as a program manager?
Generally, I would say generally not, because the program manager is not as in the detail as to what the team is doing. They're more so on a portfolio program perspective. The reason it says that they need not be technical, but they still need to be detailed enough to know what's being delivered and the ultimate, opportunity, cost, or comparative advantage of one feature not being delivered versus another. So I guess portfolio and program managers are more focused on hitting target dates, ensuring that our finances are on track and our forecast to spend is well, and our resource plan is up to spec. If there's any escalations, then the Scrum Master would escalate it to the program or portfolio manager. So the program or portfolio manager generally a bit higher level than say what we'd want from a Scrum Master, which is why generally we would say either like a team lead, so one person which might be like a subject matter expert across an array of products that you might be delivering, or a project manager, yeah, or even a BA. It's when I was back a few years ago when I was a business analyst, I wore the Scrum Master and business analyst hat. And it's very often that you'll see in banks, telco, insurance, that your BA and Scrum Master will be a hybrid role. Yeah,
Thank you.
no
I have a
problems.
question.
Yep.
Where is the regression part? It's the next slide.
Yeah, so testing, we'll cover that off in our next slides. So regression testing is a phase that's captured at the end of the iteration. So that can be done as your IAT, so your integrated acceptance testing, which covers your regression, your SIT, your UAT test plan. So generally, once you've locked down the code, then at the end of the phase, it'll be passed on to the QA analyst to do their regression. And if anything needs to be refined.
If it's much more than 4 weeks, then how it can combine as agile?
Nothing exists more than 4 weeks.
The test, if they last more than 4 weeks, then how can it be integrated as the agile module?
Well, testing is, I guess, different. So the development is iterative. So in sprint development and in sprint testing will happen over a fortnightly cycle. If you can code and then test, and then if it's passed the code review in sprint, then we'll move it into done. But if the whole code needs to be regression tested on other applications, then that actual test phase will be coordinated by the test lead to negotiate how much time they'll require for the regression testing. So I'll give you an example over here for our CBA Carbon Mobile 5 project, which is developing an Android code base. So our development is aimed to be completed by the 31st of March, but our portfolio director for this project has negotiated with the test lead that she'll require 8 to 10 weeks to do her IAT testing, which includes regression. So the program director will factor in that timing to ensure that we've catered for regression. So essentially, you can still do your regression testing after the code has been built, but it comes down to how much time you need to do that, which will be built into the timeline of the end-to-end project.
So it's basically like a waterfall. There's no change about that.
For IAT, no, because I guess it needs to be done once the code is complete. So we can discuss that over our next slides. There's a component that I've covered off with testing. So I might move on, knowing that we have a few more slides. Okay, so moving on to the Agile Manifesto. Now this is a slide that management uses to demonstrate our shift left. So Verifone, I guess the best Agile practices, we want to be collaborative, customer-centric, and focus on customer-centric product development. So this focuses on, I guess, the left boxes are what we aim to do by working Agile. Excuse me. And the boxes on the right are more so what's centered to waterfall. So as you can see, the Agile process focuses more on individuals and interactions, working products, customer collaboration, and responding to change, all over processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiations, and following a plan. Now, some teams don't work on end-to-end customer deliverables. For example, the ADK team, the customers are the regional app devs for the ADC. For product development, where the same product is to be used for multiple customers, then the customer equivalent might be the product team. So basically, what we're trying to show over here is, I guess, collaboration, and I guess the advocacy for active planning, frequent software delivery, retrospectives to, I guess, check in every fortnight to see what worked for the team and what didn't work, and fix it for the next sprint. Or if you see that it's an ongoing issue, then it'll be raised up to management to see if we can mitigate any recurring delivery issues. Okay, so now I'll go through the overview of the Scrum framework. Now this goes into, I guess, recapping what we were speaking of before. So the product backlog is essentially your Jira backlog. So I might just open up, whilst we're discussing this, our CBA Carbon Mobile 5 backlog, just so you can So basically, what we see over here in Jira, so as we can see, Carbon Mobile 5 project is in Sprint 13. This is a massive team because we're doing the 80% of the Android build out of the Chicago team. And we have 5 members of this team which are located here in Sydney. So we basically share the workload. Now, this sprint over here, so we can see the backlog is over here. So anything that has been unprioritized and is just sitting there as a big cluster of stories, that is your product backlog. So that's already been, let me just go into, here we go. So we can see the backlog over here, 77 issues. So there's 77 unsized stories over here, which just sit in the backlog. So this is what would be called as the feature team's backlog, which would be written up by the BAs or by working with the product owner to define, I guess, the requirements of what needs to be built. So we have the product backlog. Now generally what will happen over the course of your fortnightly sprint is you'll have a sprint planning session. So your sprint planning session is when we take stories from the backlog as a team and we prioritize it into sprints. So basically what you want to do is to go into each story and discuss the story collectively as a team. When I say a team, I mean the developers and the testers, to understand what needs to be done on a development and testing perspective for each story. So once you've agreed upon the objectives and the requirements and the acceptance criteria of the story, then you'll all size it. And again, we'll discuss the finer elements of this further on. You'll size it and then you'll prioritize it into the sprint plan. So the sprint backlog will have, say, a cluster of, say, 5 or 10 stories, which the team will be working on for that 10-day sprint. Now, the sprint backlog, basically, you're going to be committing to a sizable effort. Now, it's best to understate rather than overstate. So you need not say, oh, I want to do 10 stories because I want to look really good, that I'm performing great, and, I want to do as much as I can. But you don't want to go over capacity. You don't want to bite more than you can chew. So we want to be very conservative with what we prioritize into the sprint. It's, ultimately, if you're there and you've completed your stories, you can always help out another team member to complete theirs. The first few sprints will give the team an idea of the sprint cadence. So it'll show you as a developer how much you can take on for 10 days. And there's metrics such as the velocity. So the velocity is essentially the tally of points which have been completed versus the whole tally of points, which will give you a percentage. Now that percentage gives management, so your project manager and product owner, indication of how much capacity the team is able to build over a fortnight. So by looking at that metric, then we can see if we're overburdened or if we're underburdened, and we can take on more. Or there might be some technical ambiguity, and there might be a blocker on a story, and we might require our architects or our technical leads to clarify some requirements. Ultimately, that's the intention of the sprint backlog. So when we go into the delivery, it's the whole one team. So one team works to deliver everything that's in that backlog. So you might have your back-end developers, middleware developers. If you have UX, you'll have your front-end developers. You also have your testers working together. So where you can, you'll complete that component of the code that you've committed to. And once it's ready, once it's completed, once it's done, then you'll assign it to the tester. The tester will test that the code doesn't break, or it doesn't need to be refactored or anything. And then we'll move it into the done column. Or in other areas, in other industries, we'll have the product owner involved. So I'll just reference back to this page over here. So we have a sprint board over here. So this is, and this, Chana, goes to your point, is to see how do we know who's working on what and when people are working on what and how long they have to complete. Over a 10-day sprint, everything that everyone has committed to will be on this board. So in a daily stand-up, we talk to this board over here, or if we don't want to talk to a TV screen, then we can set this board up on a wall in the office. It just means that the Scrum Master will have to print out all these cards. A bit more of a manual process, but much more satisfying in the sense it's tangible and you can pick up your tasks and drop them in the done column and whatnot. We've adapted that over here in Sydney, and it works like a charm. So essentially, you'll have your items in the to-do column that we've committed to or that we're working on will go in progress. If there's any blockers or we need some technical solutions or architecture or whatnot, it'll be on hold. Generally, I'll have a testing column also. So once the developer has completed their piece of coding, they'll pass it on to a tester. Once the tester has tested that it's okayed and done, then they'll move it into the done column. And this is where the whole definition of done falls into play. So that talks to the done column, which I'll speak to later on. So essentially, you deliver what you deliver in a fortnight. You have your daily scrums, and then at the end of the sprint, we have a sprint review, which is called basically a showcase. So a showcase is a demonstration to our customers or our stakeholders as to what we've delivered over the 10 days that we've been developing. Now, again, this applies more so, I guess, if you have some HCD or some visual designs, because it's easy to demonstrate the front end, I guess, UI coding that you've built. But where we don't have a front end UI, we can demonstrate, I guess, the back end usability by where it might connect to our host systems or to our client systems. And then at the end of the cycle, we have our sprint retrospective, which I'll talk to later on in one of our slides, which gets the team together. It's a very important ceremony in our 10-day sprint. Basically gets the team together to speak about, basically get everything off your chest, right? As in what worked for me, why I was frustrated in the last 10 days, what didn't work for me, what the team could have done better. It all happens in the retrospective. So very easy session. Basically, Scrum Master gets up on a whiteboard and draws a smiley face, a sad face, and a grim face. And with Post-its, we have the team just jot down some points, say maybe 2 or 3 points for each happy feeling, a point for what they're upset about and a point for what we could have done better. We put that all up on the whiteboard and we talk through it. And at the end of it, every team member has 3 votes. And those 3 post-its or those 3 items that have the largest number of votes are what we take up to management to refine sprint to sprint, such that to improve our quality of development and working together. So that's the overview of the Scrum framework, which I'll delve into more over today and tomorrow. Any questions regarding this? Okay. All right, so I shall move on. Okay, now you may not have this slide. This is a slide that I just put on just after I sent the packs out to you. But you might hear several different disciplines of Agile. So there's Scrum, there's Kanban, there's a scaled Agile framework. There's several. Atlassian has another version of what they call Agile. We're going to be focusing on Scrum. As I've mentioned before, Scrum splits out complex tasks into stories, visualizes things in a workflow. In Scrum, we commit to ship working software at the end of an interval. They're referred to as sprints, and the Scrum methodologies are used to ship value to customers on a regular basis. Main difference with Kanban, so Kanban is, and I'm only saying this because you'll hear it, I'm sure, and just so you know what the difference is in a high level. It's all about continuous development and delivery, but tackling a smaller number of tasks fluidly and concurrently. Kanban teams use a Kanban board more so than using, say, a backlog of user stories. So that the board displays a project or a story, and the cards move through columns to represent completion. So Kanban is useful if a team has a continuous stream of work with not many changes. So essentially, the reason that we focus on Scrum is it seems to be a bit of better quality. There's decreased time to market. Scrum brings about high team morale, so it's much more collaborative, which moves to our next point. It's increased collaboration. And there's improved progress of visibility and exposure through the metrics on, reporting your velocity and sprint cadence, by estimating each story, getting agreements from the team of how large a story is, and whatnot. Moving on to the next table. So you can see here how a Scrum board looks like. Now this you saw in Jira of what I just presented before. So similarly, we have our product owner who defines a product backlog and prioritizes our user stories or our requirements in the product backlog. And basically, the team sits together to plan out everything in the backlog. Now, once we plan, we move things into sprints. As you can see, the board over there is a sprint board. So we've got the story, the to-do, in progress, review or testing, and then done. Now, basically what the team does is we have testing reviews, we have daily Scrum meetings to reach our end goal of finishing what's in our backlog. Now, the Scrum Master facilitates all of these sessions. So yeah, as I said before, key to have in mind who the nominee of a Scrum Master would be, or if you want to take on the role of the Scrum Master, then reach out to your leads and just ensure that they know that you're keen in taking on the role. And in saying so, I can help you and do some one-on-one coaching with how to be an effective Scrum Master. Okay. Now the what's in it for me with Agile. Now again, this is just the first few slides before we actually delve into the detail of the framework. If we adapt everything that was spoken of before, then I mean it's a bit hard to see the benefits before, I guess, going through the motions. But I assure you, this framework will improve productivity of the team. It'll uplift team morale. It'll make everyone feel more empowered. Now, on a management perspective, there'll be cost reductions in delivery. So hopefully, there won't be, penalties for missing delivery milestones. That's of course if things are not in our hands. If it's a miss due to something that we've overlooked, then that's another story. But if we do things properly and we have proper visibility and we work collaboratively with our stakeholders, being our product owner, our developers and our testers together with a shared objective, then this framework will ensure that there's a faster time to market and hopefully mitigate any process efficiencies, change requests and whatnot. I think the biggest inefficiency in waterfall is the change request process, because mandates change and requirements change all the time. So what this framework does is adapt. It basically absorbs change within the process through prioritizing stories in the backlog. Okay, so this next slide over here is a program slide. So this is basically the operating rhythm that our program directors and our portfolio owners are using to drive our large-scale projects. So over here we have our program director Kamal Gandhi, who's leading the program director for the CBA project. We also have this model, which will be used for another large client of ours called National Australia Bank. So this slide is I guess there for the project managers and program directors call it. So what this slide talks to is how the overall framework drives outcomes by leveraging the Agile methodology. So on the left over here, in the second box, you have the core Agile team. So you have inputs from the end users and other stakeholders from the client. They feed information to our product owner, and the product owner checks their understanding and adds the product backlog, and basically communicates. The product owner from the client communicates their product backlog to the Verifone product owner. The Verifone product owner works closely with our development team in sprint planning. So here you can see a yellow Scrum Master person, and then you got the product owner, and then you got the team. So essentially, the Scrum Master facilitates this sprint planning session with the product owner. The way you can do this is, so before we even start a sprint zero, we'll have a discovery workshop with the client. Now, the intention of a discovery workshop is to ensure that we have prioritized epics and stories, or in waterfall terminology, requirements, such that the attendees can run through this in the session. So the attendees of this discovery session will be a technical lead from Verifone, product owner from Verifone, client representative. We'll have our QAs and our testers all in the same session. What we want to do in a discovery session is to identify or an estimate of two things. One will be budgetary guidance. So basically the artifacts from this session will give our tech teams or our technical lead an identifier as to how much time it'll take to develop what needs to be developed. So over here, development time equates to the cost of building and whatnot. And also we'll factor in if there's any technical ambiguity. So if we need a solution to be documented, then we won't ask for a functional specifications document. We'll just ask for a solution on a page. Now, a solution on a page is just an architectural diagram to show the current architecture, and maybe highlighted in a red box as to where new components of the architecture might be, mapping them into where they tie into each new requirement or each new story. Now, we'll all agree upon the epics and stories in the discovery, and that'll ultimately be what will be used to size the end-to-end time frame of what needs to be delivered. So going back to the diagram over here, so for say the CBA project, there's several streams. So we have the devices team. I'm only saying this because we're working in Verifone where we have different aspects of delivery managed by different regions. So basically, we have release management, which is your program director, and your device, all your other joint teams tie in to the core program director. So you have your device Scrum team, your estate management Scrum team. You might have an apps marketplace Scrum team, a payment apps Scrum team, a field services team, and a MOM team. So basically, these are, say, 6 teams which we have geographically, which have a team of, say, 8 to 10 people working independently for these streams. And each of these streams has a Jira page and a Jira backlog, such that when our program director wants to see where each stream is at, they can just look into Jira and see exactly what's being worked on. Now, this ties into our new interlock process. When we create a token in the backlog and that token gets prioritized and falls into the SI queue, we need to create linkages to the hierarchy SI into all other dependent Jira projects that go into the end-to-end delivery. So if, say, 5 out of 6 streams have hit a target, but the 6th stream is delayed, then Matt Fish or Mike Pulley or Thano can go into that SI token and look in to see each Jira project that's being tied into the core project to see where the delay is at, rather than having to hound the portfolio or the program director. Now, that's how that works in the new intake process. So essentially, if we're looking at our client, a lot of the times, if you're working in a bank or insurance or telco, as I said, they will also use this model. So they will have their PMO, they will have their support teams with their marketing, security, infrastructure, legal. It all ties in to release management. So everyone is a stakeholder in the process. Your program management will have your customer program director and the Verifone program director. So their main objective is to deliver an initiative within the time and the budgets established by the business case, provide resources with the right skills and mindset. And then the hierarchy is that goes up to a working group. So again, it's 10, say the large scale projects will have a working group with the client and the program director to look at the solution design and the architecture, review the risks and issues and tackle blocker items. And monthly, there'll be the executive governance meeting. So this is where the regional directors will meet with the client directors. You might hear it from time to time, Mike Pulley or Matt Fish or whoever might come and attend some of our large key stakeholder meetings. These are the executive team governance meetings. So they'll show a progress update, milestone tracking, decisions, address any risks or issues. Now, everything that comes from the Scrum team all rolls up to the top. So if there are any risks or issues or blockers, that'll be escalated to what is called a Scrum of Scrums. So each team lead or each Scrum Master will have, say, a bi-weekly meeting with other feature team Scrum Masters to discuss their key risks and issues and blockers. So we don't have risks and issues workshops where we get together for 3 or 4 hours of a week or a fortnight and go through a risk or issue log. essentially the way we capture risks and issues in Agile is quite simple, really. It's raised in the daily stand-up if there are any blockers. If the team member is unable to mitigate that blocker over the course of the day, then they will escalate it. When we escalate it, we will have a track to plan. So it's simply a post-it card, again, which says the key risk or the key issue, the resolution date, and who it's been assigned to. It is up to the owner of that risk or issue, or the person that has raised it, to ensure that they own the mitigation and the resolution of that risk or issue. The Scrum Master will keep a log of these risks and issues. This might be in Jira or Confluence, just for tracking purposes. But the necessity to have a formal risk or issue or blocker risk or a RAID, call it, isn't necessary in this framework. Any questions before I jump into roles and responsibilities? Nope. Okay. Is everyone okay? Does anyone need a break? Conscious that I've been speaking for an hour and a half. I'm happy to go on, but going back to my university days, the mind tends to drift after about an hour and a half. So if you all need a glass of water or tea or coffee, happy to do so if you like, before we come back and jump into roles and responsibilities.
There's a good number of people saying yes.
Excellent. General consensus. Okay. Well, maybe we can break for 10 minutes and come back at, it's 10 to 9 here. So, yeah, call it 10 minutes, whatever the hour clock will be at your time zone. Thanks.